If you don't like to hem by hand, or you want a hem stitch that's going to stay in for sure, your machine undoubtedly has what's called a blind hem. And to do that stitch, you need this foot. Here's what you can get. Proper adjustment and understanding of how it works, you can have it look like this. That's what I'm going to teach you next. A blind hem is probably one of those quick get-to stitches on your sewing machine. And on this one, it's this. So it's going to, can you zoom in there, Sandra? It's going to straight stitch and then hop over. Straight stitch and jump, straight stitch and jump. This stitch takes the place of, or tries to mimic, a blind hem machine, which is what tailors have. If you look at pre-made, you buy them in the store, men's pants that have an invisible hem with no stitching seen from the outside, that is a blind hem, and it's done with a blind hem machine that has a curved needle. It's really quite miraculous. So that's a dedicated machine for just blind hem. But with the foot I showed you and knowledge as I'm going to teach you now, you can pretty much duplicate that on your sewing machine. So I've pulled up my blind hem, so computerized it's going to have default settings of length and width. So we'll just leave those there. Let's say that this is the garment, and I'm going to turn up the hem. Then what you have to do is turn the fabric back. So do you see, this is the garment, this is the hem allowance. So I'm just going to turn it like that. To start off with, I have my blade right in the middle of the foot. What's going to happen is that it's going to straight stitch over here in the hem allowance, and then you want it to just jump over so that it just catches ever such a little bit of the fabric. Absolutely, positively must test on the fabric that you're going to do it on. Do you see here, I've got this fold, and this is how it's supposed to work. The fold of the garment just right up against this blade. Let's see what we've got. Well, is that invisible? I don't think so. And it shows because see, it's going straight and it's hopping over. It's catching too much of the fabric. What I can start playing with is moving by changing this wheel here. If I moved this blade further to the right, when it jumps over, it's going to get even more of the fold. There's a couple of other things that you can play with. You can play with the width of the stitch so that when it jumps over, it's not jumping over quite as far. So let's pull that down one notch. And the other thing is you can lower the upper tension. So I'm going to go down one number, which means that it's not going to squeeze the top thread quite as tightly, giving it a little more play as it does that zigzag over into the fold. Let's see what we have now. I can tell you it's just barely, I don't know if it's catching at all, so I'm going to move it back a little bit to the middle. Now do you see how it's just barely catching that fabric?
Yes.
Now let's see what it looks like. Aha! Look at that compared to this.
Oh, that looks better.
Isn't that amazing?
It is.
Now, in all fairness, and see here's where I took it too far the other way, and of course with matching color thread. This is a Ponte knit. This is a double knit, so it has some loft to it. This is a perfect fabric to do a blind hem on. Let's leave the settings the same, which were very good, and let's do it on a very lightweight cotton and see what we get. Now I would have serged this edge just to finish it off before I started to do the blind hem in this case. Well, you could in all cases. In general, I think the less you do to a hem edge, the better off, the less likely it's going to show through from the right side. And if I were making pants out of this fabric, honestly, I would not do anything to that edge. I would just leave it. It's not going to ravel, it's a knit. Okay, so let's see what we get on this woven. The other thing I can tell you is that this is going to work on a straight. It's not going to work on a curve. So if you'll recall, I had narrowed down the width. Let me take the width back up to its default. But I hope you understand that you turn the hem up and then it back so that you're stitching in the hem allowance and jumping over into the garment. What I fully expect to show you here is that because of the very thin nature of this fabric, it's really going to be impossible to make this look as good as it looked on this lofty, thicker fabric. And of course on a print it wouldn't show as much as on a solid. But actually if the thread matched, that wouldn't be too awful, all right? Hems are usually down low as well, so it's a hem stitch that is not going to come ripping out, and I think that's key for hems. So there you have it, the blind hem using the foot, and it's a combination of where you put the blade, the tension, and the width of the jump over. This was a regular blind hem. There also is what's called a stretch blind hem, so instead of straight stitching and jumping over, it has a narrow zigzag and jumps over, which would put a little bit of give within that stitch itself. Play around with a blind hem on your sewing machine.